Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. This week I'm coming at you with my Geekly Wrap-Up for the week of September 9th through September 16th. Ooh, so close. September 9th through September 15th. I read 7 books, 5 of which were graphic novels, and I replayed an old favorite board game. So let's go ahead into what I read. This week was a big, graphic novel week for me. I think partially because I was finishing up Dune for Space Opera September, but I wanted to, give myself a little bit of a break because Dune is pretty heavy and kind of serious and also kind of a drag to read at the end. So I overcompensated for that by reading, a ton of graphic novels this week. And the first one that I read is a memoir called Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. This is a story of the author's coming out to yourself about your gender being something that is outside of the gender binary. This book really gave me a lot of feels when I read it. It was also the first time that I had ever read a book, as far as I know, by an author that is non-binary who uses e-er pronouns, and that's part of neo-pronouns and stuff that I had actually not heard of those before. But yeah, this author uses those pronouns, and I thought that this was just beautifully drawn. It was extremely personal and very moving. Trigger warnings for some medical trauma, dysphoria, misgendering, that kind of thing, but I would definitely recommend this book. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars, and I am very proud to give it a spot in my queer literature collection on my shelves. Next up, another book for a queer literature collection, and that is Stage Dreams by Melanie Gilman. This is also by a non-binary author, and it is a graphic novel about Grace, who is a young trans woman running away from home because she is about to be conscripted into the Civil War, and things are kind of coming to a head with her family and her gender identity, and she does not want to be conscripted into the army to fight as a man in the war. And she meets the Ghost Hawk, who is a sort of legendary outlaw bandit in the Wild West, and her real name is Flor, and she is a girl that does a whole bunch of different heists and things like that, and they decide that they are going to try and take down some of the Confederacy and fight on the side of ending slavery and being able to live freely as they choose, and there may be a cute little romance involved as well. I really enjoyed this. I thought that the colored pencil work in it was very beautiful. I do think that the story could have gone maybe a little bit more in depth at times. It does kind of speed through the action very quickly, but it did contain something that a lot of graphic novels don't, that I really appreciated, and that is historical notes at the end of the book. There's actually the author definitely did their research, and you can learn a lot more about the history of queer and trans people during this period in American history by reading those bibliographic pieces. Then I finished up a library book called Helm for the Holidays by Valerie Estelle Frankel. The Helm stories are part of Jewish folklore and mythology, and it's basically a series of comedic stories about a bunch of archetypes, fool archetypes living in a town together that come up with really the stupidest ways to solve problems, and yet still somehow everything seems to turn out okay. One of the stories that I really enjoyed in this, each chapter is a different story for one of the major Jewish holidays. The Rosh Hashanah story has a story about a guy who puts a bunch of flowers in his beard so that he can attract more bees to make more honey for all of the special foods for the new year. Except it goes about as well as having a swarming cloud of bees around your face would go. And I really appreciated the humor of this book. I really enjoyed that it is in the kids section of my local library, so it was good. I think I gave this 4 out of 5. Then I read a book called No Ivy League by Hazel Newlevant, also by a non-binary author. I recently learned that Hazel uses they/them pronouns, and they're also the author of another comic I mentioned probably a couple years ago at this point, Sugartown, but I wanted to make sure that I reflected their updated pronouns in this video because I don't think I used the correct ones 2 years ago. So This is a story that is a like semi-autobiographical comic about Hazel's experience working in a like youth outdoors work organization called No Ivy League. And basically what all of the kids in this program are doing is they are trying to take down a bunch of invasive climbing ivy species in the woods outside of Portland, Oregon, to help get the like natural ecosystem of that area protected from the invasive species. And this is a lot about Hazel's process, learning about their own privilege that they have as a white person, because this is the first time that they like really come into daily contact with people of color, specifically African Americans. And there's like a whole attempt to engage with like the racially segregated history of Portland, Oregon. I feel that while this book made an effort to attempt to engage with concepts like privilege and look at race critically, it tried to do too much at once, and I don't think it really engaged with race critically in a satisfactory way. It was very much a story about race and privilege that was centering a white person's experience, and I think that it was maybe, how do I want to put this? I think that it was kind of oversimplified the way in which Hazel actually learns about race and segregation and their own white privilege, because it kind of seems like Hazel goes to the library one day, reads about segregation in the history of Portland, and then suddenly they like totally understand all of the complexities of what it means to be a person of color in America. And then they kind of just go back to being friends with the black kids that they work with, even though their actions inadvertently got one of the black kids fired. It is a bit more complicated than that in the story, because there is a lot of stuff that is tied up with teenagers, like emergent sexuality and learning what is and is not appropriate to say to people in a work context between teenagers. I just don't think that this book really handled the discussion about race as well as it could have. Take that for what you will, because I am a white person reviewing this book. Like, my lived experience is not the same as a person of color in this country. I just think that this book could have done so much more to engage with that. So I ended up giving it 3 out of 5. It was okay. Then I finished a book that is such a book, really. It is such a book. It's going to need its own damn video once I actually finish writing the script for it, and that was my Space Opera September read of the week, Dune by Frank Herbert. I've actually been reading this book for the past couple of weeks. It's just that when something goes in my Geekly Wrap-Up, it means that I finished reading it that week. Doesn't necessarily mean I read the whole thing in 1 week. So it took me just over 2 weeks to read this, which is why it's in this video. I have a lot of thoughts about this book, but I will try and just condense it down, because I'm going to make an entire separate video about it, to say that, yes, it's important to the genre of science fiction. Many better things have been written since then, and I don't think it's as good as everybody remembers it being. You can't really deny this book's towering stature in our popular culture, especially if you are a sci-fi nerd like myself. But I don't think it's as good as everyone remembers it is. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I have lots of thoughts about this book. I am going to be making an entire sort of like review, personal reaction to Dune video. So stay tuned for that, because that's way outside of what I can do in just a quick Geekly Wrap-Up. Then I read the graphic novel Laura Dean is Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. This book destroyed me in the best way. It is the story of this girl, Freddie, who is in high school, and she's in kind of this toxic on-again, off-again relationship with her girlfriend, Laura Dean. And Laura Dean is basically just kind of emotionally using Freddie, and is not like a very good person for Freddie to be in a relationship with, but Freddie is like crushing hard on this girl. And so every time Laura Dean dumps her and then wants to get back together, she just keeps going and getting back together. This is kind of causing her to neglect her friendships, neglect her own self-worth and self-respect. And there is this great story arc that has to do with Freddie and her best friend Doodle and this sort of falling out that they have because Doodle thinks that Freddie can really do better than crawling back to this toxic girl, but then their friendship is in jeopardy because they're not communicating with each other. I would also just like to give an incredible shout out to the artist's use of the color pink in this story. Every time Laura Dean is portrayed on the page, she's sort of line art done over with a like millennial pink sort of hue. Let me see if I can find a good page like that, because I don't think that's going to give anything away. Yeah, something like this, where there's the line art and then Laura Dean is shown all in pink. And I think that that really just underlines how much Freddie idolizes and idealizes Laura Dean. She's literally looking at her through rose-colored glasses. It's why she keeps wanting to stay in a relationship that is obviously not working for her. And it isn't until she has the really like come to Jesus moment with her best friend Doodle that we ever see something that is real and emotionally important to Freddie get highlighted with this pink color. It's when she and Doodle are hugging after the big thing happens in the book, and it's like this relationship between the two of them is something that is real. It's something that's strong. It's a friendship that's meaningful to both of them. It enriches both of them as people. And then that's when we see the paradigm literally start to shift for Freddie, where Laura Dean is no longer portrayed through these rosy glasses, but it is her friendship. And then at the very end, we get a little hint of Freddie beginning to see herself in that own light. Her entire body isn't covered in that pink hue, just her jacket is, but it's almost like she's beginning to look at herself through that same lens of love and joy and care for oneself that she once looked at this very toxic person that she was in a relationship with. And it just broke me. It left me flabbergasted and speechless, and, you know, I think many of us go through relationships at some point in our lives where we really could be with people that treat us better. I know I certainly have gone through that relationship in my life, and it just hit me so hard. I think this is going to be one of my favorite books of 2019. And then the final book that I read, if you watched my autumnal TBR video, you will already know about this, is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This is another graphic novel story about friendship, this time between two best friends, Deja and Josie, who work at a pumpkin patch together and decide that their last night at the patch before they finish up with high school and go off to college, they're gonna let loose and do all the fun things that they never gave themselves permission to do before. I picked this up because I thought it was going to be a really fun, cute autumnal read, and it absolutely was. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars for sheer adorable wholesomeness. And then the other thing that I did this week that I have to wrap up is that I replayed an old favorite game, Quacks of Lindbergh. This time my friend Emily absolutely destroyed us in this push-your-luck game of exploding potions. If you want to learn more about Quacks of Lindbergh and how it plays, I will go ahead and link the video where I actually explained the game upstairs. But it's just such a fun, delightful game. Like I said before, I think it's the game that my husband and I have played the most this year out of the games in our collection. It just really never gets old. Very excited as well to announce that we are going to be getting the expansion to that game, which adds some like herb witches and stuff that give you little power-ups in the game. I believe either later this month or early in October. So whenever that does get released, I will try to get a hold of it and review it for this channel. So that is going to do it for this week's Geekly Wrap-Up. Comment down below if you have read any of these books or are interested in any of them whatsoever. Also, fellow Space Opera September people out there, I salute you. I see you working hard to read and name your homeworlds when we win. Thank you all, as always, so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I am trying to get to 300 subscribers by the end of the year, and it means very much to me when you do subscribe. Thank you all, as always, so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.